Hi students, welcome back. Uh, Let us discuss the time complexity. In the previous video, I explained the space complexity. Now let us see the time complexity. Actually, the space complexity and the time complexity will tell the system performance. These two will analyze the system performance. So whatever the the system, the algorithm performance. So whatever the algorithm you are written, okay, so the algorithm performance can be analyzed by using space complexity and the time complexity. So actually this time complexity, it the total amount required by an algorithm to complete its execution. To complete its execution, you call it as a time complexity. So time complexity is nothing but it calculates the total time that it takes, that algorithm takes to execute one task. Okay, so that is the time complexity. So again, whatever I said in the space complexity, that space complexity will be divided into two. It's a constant space complexity and the linear space complexity. So constant means only fixed amount of space will be allocated to all inputs, okay, whereas linear means whenever the inputs are increasing, automatically the amount of space will be increasing. In the same way, for the time complexity also, you are having time complexity, constant time complexity, constant time complexity, and linear time complexity. Okay, so the algorithm that should be a constant, that uses a constant time complexity, or the algorithm will use a linear time complexity. So when you say it is a constant time complexity, if a program requires fixed amount of time, okay, so if a program requires fixed amount of time for all inputs, so whatever the inputs that you are using, so for all the input values, then you can say it is a constant time complexity. Okay, if a program requires fixed amount of time for all input values, then it should be a constant time complexity. So example, just in the previous, just like for space complexity, whatever the example you have taken, that I am writing here, in sum of int a comma int b. So there I had taken only one variable, that is integer a, that I had multiplied, okay, it's written a into a. There I'm using only one variable, that should be the fixed amount of space will be allocated to that variable. Whereas in the time complexity, I'm using the input values a and b, return a plus b. Okay, so here these are input values, whatever you are taken, okay, these input values are related to integer. So the amount of time will be fixed for these input values, that you call it as a constant time complexity. If their values will be fixed, then it will be constant time complexity. So now coming to the linear time complexity. So what is this linear time complexity? If input values are increasing, means if you are using the more input values, then the time complexity may changes. The time complexity will changes. Obviously, in the space complexity, if you are using more values, the space will be occupying more. So whenever the input values are increasing, automatically the algorithm space complexity is also increasing. means it is varying. Just like that, here also in the linear time complexity, whenever you are increasing using the more input values, the time complexity will be calculated for those input values, or else if you are using more steps to calculate the problem, okay, automatically the time complexity will be increased. So that case you call it as a linear time complexity. So let us take one example. So just like that, here also you have to follow some steps. If you want to calculate the linear time complexity, the steps that you have to be followed for an exam. Suppose before going to an example, let us take for comments. If you are using the comments in an algorithm or in a program, for that comments, the linear time complexity is 0 steps. For assignment statements, so if you are using any assignment statements like is equal to, the time complexity should be 1 step. If you are using condition statements, any of the condition statements if you are using, the time complexity for that is also 1. Okay. Suppose if you are using any loop conditions for n times, if you are using loop conditions for n times, then it should be n plus 1 steps. Okay, suppose if you are discussing about the body of the loop, you are entering into the program into body of the loop, then it should be n steps, because n times you are entering into the body of the loop. So n times loop conditions will go to n plus 1 times. Okay, so just remember these points. Now take one example for this linear time complexity. Okay, so let us take the example. Suppose int sum of int a, int n. So this is a variable array will be used and integer n. Here int sum is equal to 0 comma I. Okay, so I am using the for loop. For I is equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus, and then sum is equal to sum plus a of I, return sum. So this is a simple program that I am calculating sum of a plus I. So that here this is the array, the I value should be 0 to up to n minus 1. Okay, so now calculate the cost, repetition and total for this program. Okay, so cost, repetition, total. So for sum is equal to 0, answer this is the time complexity for declaring this should be 0. Int sum is equal to 0 comma I. For assignment operation, what is that step? The cost is 1. Okay, so here no repetition, so 1 it is. For loop, okay, for I is equal to 0, assignment for 1, I less than n, this is for 1, and iteration is for 1, the normal cost. If you are taking for the repetition, okay, general normal cost value I am entering here. Okay, the repetition for this condition is assignment 1. So they are saying whenever the condition, loop condition is there for n times. So here the loop condition is there for n times. So what is that? N plus 1. Okay, now you entered the body of the loop. So body of the loop, whenever you are entering to the body of the loop, this should be n steps. Okay, so now coming to this, here the assignment operation, sum value, and this is for 2. Okay, and it enters into the body of the loop already. Okay, so now here the value is n for repetition. And for return sum, so this is variable decoration, means you are getting the answer. The cost for this is 1. Repetition here is also 1. Okay, so now see the total, 1 into 1. So here this is 2n plus 2. Okay, 1 is multiplying here and 1 is multiplying this and 1 is multiplying for this. So total here it is n plus 2 plus n, that is 2n plus 2, and 2 into n, 2n, 1 into 1, 1. So the total cost of this, the total time complexity of this simple program is 4n plus 4. Okay, so this is the total time complexity for this program. This is how you are going to be calculate whatever the program they are given for that program, or whatever the algorithm they are given for that algorithm, you have to calculate the time complexity like this. So these are the steps you have to be noted. For comments, it only takes 0, assignment statement 1, condition statements for only 1. Whenever you are having the loop conditions for n times, you have to take it as n plus 1 steps they are taking. So the time complexity for this is n plus 1, and the body of loop they are calculating as n steps, the linear time complexity. Okay, so this is the example, and for this example you are going to be calculate the cost and the time complexity. Thank you.